Hi there, welcome to Have a Go Heroes. We're going to try something a bit different today. Sort of a few things to get out of the way before we start on that. As of next time, all of the stream videos are being passed over to somebody else to edit. So if you see an improvement in quality, that's amazing, brilliant. Don't give me any kudos though. It'll be Luke who's on the stream. He's sort of taking over. So blame him if things go wrong. Thanks, Luke. However, the continuing poor edited videos will be from me and our new member. Well, not new member. This is Jen.
Hello.
She's been a member of Have a Go from the start, but while we wanted to have her in the stream, there's a bit of an issue in that we're married and have kids, so that's problematic from a
Childcare perspective.
yeah, and us being completely forthright and down with the new kids and feeling like we should be all equality based, I DM'd and Jen didn't play.
Yeah, well, it's pretty hard for the DM to miss a session
Yeah.
and take turns.
So we've been thinking about how we can get Jen on board, and we came up with an idea, didn't we, a couple of days ago? Do you want to explain that, or how do you want to do this?
Well, I think we should probably talk a little bit about our gaming backgrounds to explain why we came up with this as an idea. So basically,
That creates an era of suspense.
So my background, I've been playing D&D since I was probably like maybe 8 or 9, perhaps even younger. I can't remember exactly. My dad and his roommate from uni, who they're still friends now, have been playing the same D&D campaign, updated to all the different editions since I think it's like 1982 or something. They have ridiculously high level characters now. Anyway, I remember when we used to meet up when we were kids, and Dad and Pete were always playing, and eventually I asked if I could play. So Pete was my first DM when I was a kid. I think we started in 3rd edition and then upgraded to 3.5 and 4th before we stopped. I obviously grew up and 5th hadn't come out by the time we ended up, well, just not really playing anymore because I didn't visit as much. And yeah, so I've been playing a really long time, but I'd only really played like with our family in a very homebrewed, house ruled type game with my younger siblings and Pete's kids. And I've never really played it by the book as such.
Not until we met.
Not until we met. So when I went to uni, eventually I found Chimera, who's one of Have a Go's sponsors, who are a gaming shop I used to work for briefly, actually. That's where me and Ben met. And it wasn't until then that I'd even played a role-playing game apart from D&D.
Really, I had no idea.
Yeah, I hadn't played anything apart from D&D until that point. So I have since played Mutants and Masterminds and various World of Darkness games and lots of other stuff. I've played loads of stuff now, but really D&D is what I'm most familiar with. But I have never DM'd, ever. Well, I've maybe done like half a session once for Ben, maybe, slightly. It was terrible. But I've pretty much never DM'd, and I've never DM'd a campaign, and I've never DM'd for a group. And yeah, so that's my background.
Whereas I started DMing. That was how I started. You know that annoying kid in the, like, maybe you don't, maybe you haven't been DMing that long, but it was always that annoying kid when you were young who was the guy who just made everyone play D&D. And that was me. I didn't actually start with D&D. I started with World of Darkness, which was probably above my age bracket when we started. But I got to D&D through it and retroactively played First Ed because I could only afford second-hand stuff at the time. So I've played every edition of D&D and DM'd every edition of D&D accidentally, one way or another. Second, just about. We've got very different backgrounds in that Jen's always been the player, whereas really only since 3rd edition have I really, and like late 3.5, have I started playing the game. So we kind of wanted to work a way of switching roles, but that requires Jen to learn DMing. Dun dun dun.
Well, yeah, the ethos of the stream since we started it, while I'm not in it, we did kind of start together, was have a go. It's Have a Go Heroes. So I've decided that why not have a go at DMing and film it for you all to watch. What a disastrous
She's beginning
idea.
to realise
I'm regretting it
just
already.
how
This is a
annoying this will
disaster waiting
be.
to happen.
Yeah, so the idea is to create a series of videos, not just this video. This will be the first. So we're about to go through some of the common ideas and problems and work out whether we can meet those head on first, so that before we even get to a situation where Jen is learning to DM, we can kind of just address some of the problems she's had before and maybe ways she's found through them.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys will follow our journey along and think, actually, those are some similar things to what I've been feeling, and I could also apply these ideas to my own gaming group and give it a go alongside us. So,
Including
yay.
finding a gaming group, which
Yes.
is going to be interesting.
Yeah, because obviously until I was an adult, I had only ever played with family members, and I didn't actually realise until I was an adult that there was such a thing as like a hobby store where you could go and play. I knew that comic book stores existed and you could buy the books and stuff. It just didn't occur to me that you could actually play in the store. I don't quite know how this happened, but it didn't ever come up, because why would I want to play with people I don't know? Because I don't know. It's a bit of a bizarre. It's so bizarre. I don't know. But I think it's so different nowadays, because there's quite a lot of hobby stores out there. But I mean, even places like like this, big bookstores are running Magic the Gathering now. Like I think geekiness in general is just more out there and more mainstream. But also things like social media have made it so much easier to find like-minded people who might want to give this a go with you. It's a really different experience. Or you can just rope your siblings into it.
I feel like your experience of D&D was like everybody else's experience of like Ludo. It was just a thing you did at Christmas.
What's Ludo? What's Ludo?
Let's move on. Because I'm worried now. I'm thinking of Uno in my head, and now I'm worried there is no Ludo. Isn't Ludo the guy from...
He's from Labyrinth.
Okay, we'll cut this. We won't cut this, I don't know. Power. So, some common misconceptions.
You'll have no one to play with you. Well, usually, if you've come up with the idea that you want to DM, having been a player, you've been playing with at least one other person so far, who's probably your DM. So either you've been in a solo campaign, or you've been a player in a bigger group. And maybe part of your problem is that you're in an ongoing campaign. It's weekly, you're playing the same thing, and you don't want to interrupt the flow of that to start up your own thing, or you feel like that would be maybe rude, or that your players wouldn't want to do that or want to commit to anything long term because they're already in this campaign. So I think really that's totally down to the people you're playing with. Like maybe you could come up with an extra evening, try it as a one-off, or like your friend Chris has done a one-shot which turned into a three-shot, but it was a one-shot really of just trying out DMing, because he'd never tried it before. He's a fairly new player, but he just took over a couple of Ben's DMing evenings for the same slot as they normally play, and they just had a break from their regular campaign, and that worked quite well for him.
Yeah, I would always say, like, if you're worried about the fact that no one's going to play with you, if you have a DM group, a DM and a group, then feel free to just ask, because the DM might be like, actually, next week I am not prepared for that big combat you got coming up. And if you haven't got a group, that's more difficult, but it's the modern era. Get on D&D Beyond, get on Roll20, like sites that really kind of, they're about networking. You'll find something.
And quite a lot of your local hobby stores now have Facebook groups specifically for different things they run, so they'll have a group for role playing, and that's the best place to post and find a group, or even if it's just as a one shot or like a one-off game, to just give it a go. Or you could even post and say, are there any DMs free to meet for a coffee and just like talk me through some stuff about this game idea I've had. And I'm sure there'll be people out there who are willing to help you. Or you can send us an email and we'll talk you through some stuff.
There's on EN World, which is a sort of forum site that does news, there's when you sign up, you have to put your location in, and whether you're open to what games. So you can kind of find, if you're desperate, you can go there, sign up, and you'll find that there are people in your area who maybe are interested in the game. So there are lots of different ways now to find a group.
So once you've got a group, I think the next thing really is to decide if you want to run a solo campaign, i.e. for one player, or a group game, because they, as far as I've understood it as a player, they have they're unique in that they have different challenges as a DM for presenting an adventure. If you're playing as a solo player, like the impact of your NPCs is very different, and the balance of like monsters, for example, is very different. And I think Ben would more to say about that.
I would always say pick a group. I know it sounds really weird because you think that one person is like going to make it easier because you're going to focus on lots of people, but solo campaigns are a different beast. You rely on the energy of that other person, especially if they've never done it before. It's just two people who have no idea what they're doing. Secondly, if you do a solo campaign, you're learning a different D&D or a different role-play game, whatever role-play game you pick, because a group is about a different dynamic. The solo campaign is about the story you and one other person are telling, whereas if you've got lots of people dotted around the table, it's going to go in lots of different directions, and you learn how a role-playing group works, which is more commonly the experience. So I would suggest pick a group. That's just me. Having said that, I probably, when I started out, did do a lot of solo campaigns out of paranoia more than anything else.
So what is the
horror's easier with one player.
What is the ideal group size though? Because I wouldn't feel confident to DM for 7 players.
Well,
maybe ever.
Every DM is a different number.
Yeah, but okay, what if I want to pick up the book right now and look at the balance of monsters and stuff like that? What is your ideal group?
Find 4 friends.
4 friends. I have 4. Maybe.
Because then in theory you could just hand them the 4 classic characters like cleric, wizard, rogue, fighter. Like you could hand them that start of a party, or they don't have to fill those niches, but at least they can. And you kind of 4 is the game's assumption, between 4 and 6, and 4 is the smallest of those numbers. You might find eventually that you like running for 12 people. You know, that's a possibility. There are lots of games that run really hardcore. Like we ran a 13-player game once, but I think very drunk.
I think yeah, that's crazy. I think after a certain point, like your plan probably goes out the window as a DM, because your players, the more players you have, the more zany ideas are going to be out there, and the more tangents they can find to wander off at. So I feel like I know certainly the games I've been in as a player, which have had more players, have definitely gone in some really odd directions, but the DM in some ways has had less to do, because the story almost writes itself. When you have that many players and their interpersonal relationships, the relationships with NPCs isn't quite as important, so you have less planning to do in that regard, because they almost just build their own story. There's only certain things then that you need to do.
Yeah,
it's a really different experience. But also I think part of it is that you need to decide the kind of DM you want to be in, that the kind of story you want to tell. Like some players are really into the let's go and bash some monsters and collect the loot and get stronger and totally like max out our stats and all the rest of that stuff. It's almost like computer gaming around a table on paper.
Yeah, we'll look at session 0 at some point. Write that down.
Session 0.
This is the only power I have, is to tell her to write things down and to occasionally yell cut.
Yeah.
At the
but
right
otherwise, other players are really. I know me as myself as a player are really into the story, and they love like the overarching story of the world, or perhaps their own personal story as a player. A lot of players will do things to the detriment of their character if it improves the story itself, and you need to really gauge the kind of game that your players want to play. And I think one of the things that I've really picked up from Ben when he's started a new group is that he always gives out this questionnaire of 20 odd questions about the character that you're going to play, to kind of help you as a player get to know your character. But because the player has, depending on how the player fills out that questionnaire, you can gauge the sort of game they want to play in. And I think if you present them with a game that they want to play, then your DMing experience is inevitably going to be more successful because you're giving them the experience that they want to have in their leisure time.
Yeah, I mean, if we come back to group numbers for a bit as well, like that's important to bear in mind when you get this group started, is that if you get this group together who want this experience, the less people you have in the group, the more likely you're all going to hit those numbers. Once you get over 4 or 5 players, someone in there maybe doesn't want to play Middle Earth, they want to play Game of Thrones, or their ideal story is Conan, or Mad Max, and suddenly you're adding stuff to the game that maybe other people didn't want, and that accelerates when you get a successful game going, and maybe someone gets wind of it and wants to join in. And then you will probably cover that really far down the road. But like the idea that you control is easier the smaller amount of players you've got, and 4 is optimal for the game to run. Having said that, we barely ever keep it at 4. So what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's a fine balance. You don't want to control your players. I don't think that's the right term, but you want to. I feel like as the DM, you want to feel like you have a handle on the story you're presenting, and if it goes way off base of if you started in Middle Earth and it ended up World of Darkness levels of scary or twisted,
then you're in my game.
Then but that might not be something that you're comfortable with as a DM, and the more players you have, that's harder to manage. I also think the more players you have, it's difficult to manage sometimes. I perceive it being difficult to manage the fact that in a typical 3-hour session, not all 6 of your players are going to have a spotlight moment that's really significant, because you just haven't physically got the hours to make something special for every single person, or an extra story element, or advance their personal goals or whatever. And it's keeping the interest of those people who for that session are not the focal point. I think that's something I will be hyper aware of, because I'm so paranoid about disappointing people when they've chosen to spend their time doing this with me. That's something I'm really concerned about.
First thing you need as a DM is a tough skin and the ability to forgive yourself.
Yeah, I'm kind of sensing that already.
It's teacher training all over again.
It's just we won't even go there.
Yeah.
There's things we don't need to talk about.
Okay.
I've played for so long with people who are so experienced as DMs, I can't get over this idea that I'm somehow going to do it wrong, probably because I have fairly poor rules knowledge. I would have to look up nearly everything especially because I started playing as a child, and a lot of our to my knowledge, a lot of our gaming was house rules because we were kids and it was just easier. We didn't need to have that rules knowledge, because apart from adding up my own damage from my quarterstaff or whatever, I didn't really ever. I was always the druid. I love druids. I didn't really need to know anything else, because Pete knew all the rules, and it just wasn't relevant. I didn't find it relevant, but I feel I'm very story driven as a player. Like, the story is what I find interesting, not the mechanics of the game in itself or anything like that. So I feel like my lack of rules knowledge at some point will trip me up. It'll interrupt the flow of the game. It will annoy my players to no end, especially if they have played a lot and they know a lot more than me, or I decide to house rule things because it suits my style and I feel like that's going to annoy people. So I think that's one of the things that's held me back so far, is that I don't feel confident in my knowledge of what's in here.
Okay, firstly, we're going to look through that. That's a big deal at some point, but it's also not a big deal. Yes, rules are important. You have to have a basic grounding.
Yeah.
But that's it. Like, some players don't even own the DMG.
Yeah.
Secondly, what you got to do is kind of think, I need to own this, and if my style is narrative and my designs are narrative, then maybe just come out right off the bat. The first time you meet your players and you decide you're going to run a campaign, you say, look, it's going to be narratively styled. I'm not going to follow certain rules. I'm going to house rule a lot of stuff, and you know that from day one. So expect a different game, expect a different beast, and expect those narrative points to be more of a focus. And like, it might turn some players off. Like there are some, like, I do like my crunchy combat in the middle of everything, but that wouldn't turn me off. But then other players who are maybe more focused on that, you wouldn't want them in the game anyway. Yeah. Like, actually just being upfront about that and being like, well, I have a grounding in the rules, but it's the rules I'm interested in to tell the story I'm telling.
Yeah.
Then those people who don't want to tell that story are gone.
Yeah.
And
I think maybe actually I probably know more rules than I realise that I know. Like, I know pretty much how a combat works. I know how to do an initiative order. I know how roughly what a player can do in a turn. I could probably hash it out to some extent. There's things like I've never once cast a spell with a spell component. I've never used spell components as a player. And to my knowledge, I've not actually been in a game that's used spell components, but I know that's...
It's only specific spells.
Yeah, I know it's only certain spells. I couldn't tell you which spells needed them because I've never used it. It's just not something we ever did when we played. So, I don't know, I guess I could just like leave that out of my game.
If it worked for your game that you were playing in.
I don't see, this is so, I think that's the problem, isn't it? Because you have all these anxieties that hold you back. I mean, actually, when you sit and really analyse it like this is the first time we've really talked about this in depth, it's actually not that big a deal, and it's something that's fairly easy to get over because...
All you have to do when you make that change is to realise that there'll be knock-on effects. So if you get rid of spell components that cost money, then you devalue money, and that's the only thing you have to think about, which 5th Ed already has done.
Yeah, so, I haven't played a huge amount of 5th Ed because we had children and they're still quite young, and honestly, it's a scheduling issue more than anything.
One is a barbarian, the other is a bard.
Yeah, they're both under 4.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
No, I mean in real life.
So I think, I guess as long as you're internally consistent with whatever rule changes or tweaks or whatever you decide. So if I decide, that X spell is not going to need spell components, then what about Y spell, and why is that different? Or maybe it's an all or nothing thing, and I need to decide that as soon as it comes up in a relevant point.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head on the thing that needs to happen once you start doing this, go down this road of, well, actually I'm going to move stuff around, is that your universe has to be internally consistent. Yeah. And as long as you hit that, players are going to forgive 95% of the rest of everything you do. There'll be people who take offence, but we'll deal with that in another video, I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which probably brings us on to another anxiety, which would be player reaction. So this is something that people have decided to do for fun in their free time, voluntarily, as far as I'm aware, and I'm really worried that they're going to go away at the end of a session think that was 3 hours of my life I've just wasted because it was dull, or she didn't know what she was doing, or it was all over the place, or the group didn't gel, or it just, I don't know, maybe the story itself was just uninteresting. I didn't get to do anything. My personal story didn't advance. The story overall as an arc didn't.
She just listed
Oh my goodness! It's just all these things that I think, how can I possibly hit all of these checkpoints in a typical session length game? It's just never going to happen, is it? So I think it's almost like I'm so worried about failing, I haven't even tried, but really, what would be the worst thing that happened if I did actually fail? Like, they'd be disappointed in me.
For a week.
Yeah,
For a week.
and
Like,
then
I
maybe,
think
maybe
this
they'd
might
never speak to me again. I don't know.
this
but,
might require a
I
psychiatrist
need
couch.
actual
I'm not going to try and
I need
diagnose
some actual
you.
counselling. But anyway, so I think the thing that we need to address is concerns about how your players are going to react.
You're going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
Everyone has bad days.
And I've been in those sessions as a player where your DM is just, you can just tell they're just not in it. Then they've had a bad day, work was terrible, or something
is wrong with the session.
Or something has gone on. Like maybe there's, I don't know, a friendship issue between players in the group rather than their characters, and that's affecting how their characters are acting with each other in a way that it shouldn't, but it does because real life is complicated.
I mean, you're not even. You see that you're assuming that's beyond your control. But even when something in your control goes wrong, that is not the end of the world. I mean, we've had a situation where I think at one point where like we did some stuff where I introduced a storyline and it was too adult. Really too adult, and I could feel the table go cold. Like we've been playing the game for years, and that was too far.
Yeah.
And all I did was finish the session as I would have done, and then the next session we moved the storyline forward and didn't come back to it. It was only addressed in kind of in that one of the characters involved, one of the NPCs had to be in the rest of the plot later on because they interacted with him again. But it very much like we just moved on and everything was fine.
Yeah.
Everyone still remembers that campaign as being great.
So I think that's something that I've played in a lot of Ben's games, and I think that's something he does really well, is that he can look at a session and think, these things went great, these things didn't, and this is what I need to change next time to improve the player experience. So I think as long as you're able to step back and assess what you've done, or even ask your players directly, like which bits did you really like, or which bits were not so great this time, then you can only get better. And the only way that you're ever going to come into this situation is if you even try in the first place. Like there's absolutely no point me sat here thinking about all the things that could go wrong for a game I have never run in 20 years. It's what a waste of my time and my energy to be so panicked about it.
I feel like you're growing as a person.
No, it's therapeutic. No, it's true though, because until I actually do it, I have no idea how good or not good I am as a DM. And I'm sure in the however many years I've been playing D&D, I must have picked up at least some things that were good from some of my DMs, because they're not bad DMs. They're really good DMs. They know what they're doing, and they've all of the games I've played, or nearly all of the games I've played in, have been really fun. And the ones that weren't as good, I can also think, why were they not as good, and what was it that turned me off about those games, and try not to do those things. And that's all you can do. And I guess if you are a very new player and you haven't had a lot of experience, then there's other ways to figure out the kind of things that good DMs do. So for
watching this series.
Obviously watching our stream.
Yeah.
The Go Heroes. We're on Instagram now. We have sponsorship anyway. But
we should talk about those sponsors at the end.
Yes, we'll talk about those guys at the end. They're great.
We got a discount code and everything.
But people like probably the most famous right now is Critical Role. If you want to have a look at a DM DMing, then that's a really good place to start, because you're not in it as a player, so you can sort of step back and think, how is he managing his table? What is he doing to keep people engaged? Or I really like that thing that he did. But because you're not playing it yourself and having to make character decisions or act in character, you've got that space to really think about what's going on. So it doesn't really matter if you haven't had a lot of gaming experience, because we're in that wonderful era of the internet where we can find all this stuff online and find games that people are running and have a look at what other people are doing and just get an idea, like a flavour.
They probably know that though, because they're watching us on the internet. You're a step ahead already.
Okay, guys,
brilliant.
we're halfway there.
Okay, we're already running over time on this video,
Way
so
over time.
we're gonna.
I talk a lot. I've realised I'm going to be great at this because I just jabber and jabber.
Great,
jabber.
yeah. Let's just,
yeah, so-
there's a few things to cover before we leave. Firstly, those wonderful sponsors, let's just talk about them for a minute. D20 Heroes, they do great gaming apparel. Hopefully we're going to get ourselves some t-shirts. So
We'll put their website in the doobly-doo.
The doobly-doo, that's the thing down there. Source
Copyright, Matt
doobly-doo.
Colville.
Matt
We'll
Colville
talk about that
and-
guy
and-
later, he's
and
great.
PBS Ideas channel. But
Yeah.
there's a 10% discount on all of their lovely gaming merchandise. Like I say, we'll put the link and the code in the description. We just want to say that this series is going to continue. We're not 100% sure what we're going to do next episode yet. We're either going to crack open the PH, or we're going to look again at those inspirations and or maybe we'll just filter in an inspiration every time.
Yeah, or perhaps we'll go chapter by chapter through the DMG, or there's all different things to cover, such as building a world, or building NPCs, or
don't build a whole world to begin
or
with.
what is exactly things we need to talk about. What is a session 0, and do I want one in my game?
That's probably going to be next session.
All kinds of things that we're going to cover, but hopefully the culmination of these videos, you will actually get to see me DMing probably a solo campaign for them. I know we've just talked about.
No, we're going to find some players.
Oh,
yes, yeah, absolutely. We're going to rope some people in.
Okay, we'll figure something out.
Yeah. We haven't discussed this.
We have not.
Can you tell?